All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're actually going on a quest. No, not for gold or anything like that, but for a single, really powerful number. A number that lets us look at a risky promise from the future and figure out exactly what it's worth in our hands today.
So let's start with a question that sounds simple but gets complicated really fast. Imagine a company promises to pay you $1,000, but say 5 years from now. What is that promise actually worth right now? Well, it's definitely not $1,000, right? Because there's always a chance, even a tiny one, that they might not be able to pay you back. So how do you put a price tag on that kind of uncertainty?
And that, right there, is the huge challenge when you're trying to value something like a corporate bond. You're not just looking at the interest it promises to pay, you have to somehow account for the very real risk that the company could default. We need a system, a way to measure and price all those risks to figure out what a fair value really is. Okay, let's get into it. Here's the plan for our quest today. We're going to start with the core problem, then I'll show you our treasure map, that's the discount rate formula. After that, we'll hunt down its two key ingredients before putting it all together to see why this one little number is so incredibly powerful.
Okay, so every quest needs a map, right? For us, that map is a formula. This is the key that's going to guide us through all the complexities of risk and time to find the value we're looking for.
And this is the treasure we're after, the risk-adjusted discount rate. Its job is to take all those uncertain payments a bond might give you in the future and translate them into a single solid value in today's money. It's literally the bridge between a future promise and what it's worth right now.
You know, the formula itself looks pretty simple, but don't let that fool you. It's incredibly powerful. To get our discount rate, we just need to solve for two things: the risk-free rate, which is our starting point, and the expected risk premium, which is the extra reward we need for taking on all that risk.
All right, first stop on our map. Before we can even start to price risk, we need a baseline. We need to know what a world with basically no risk looks like. It's time to track down the first, and honestly, the simpler of our two ingredients.
So, what's a risk-free investment? Well, in the world of finance, the closest thing we've got is a government bond from a really stable economy, like a U.S. Treasury note. I mean, the idea is that the U.S. government is, well, it's about as certain to pay its debts as anyone can be. For what we're doing, the 10-year Treasury note is the perfect benchmark.
So we just pull the latest data from the market. And there we have it. Our first ingredient is locked in. The current risk-free rate based on that 10-year Treasury comes out to about 3.83%. Okay, one down, one to go.
Okay, now for the real challenge, the boss level of our quest, if you will. This next ingredient is what makes a corporate bond different from a safe government bond. This is where we have to account for, well, everything that could go wrong.
And what's so interesting here is that risk isn't just one thing. Of course, you've got the obvious one, the risk that the company just plain defaults. But you also have to think about how easily you can sell the bond, that's the liquidity premium. Then there's how far away the maturity date is, how it's taxed, and even what we think inflation is going to do. It's a lot to consider.
So, to wrap all those different kinds of risk into a single number, we actually have a little mini-quest with its own formula. We need to figure out the return of the overall market and then tweak it using this thing called beta. Just think of beta as a number that tells us how much a single investment zigs when the whole market zags. It's a measure of our bond's sensitivity to the market's mood swing.
So look, it's a two-step process, pretty straightforward. First, we figure out what the broad market is generally returning. Then, we figure out how our specific bond tends to move compared to that market. Let's get step one done. Okay, to get that market rate of return, we need three things. We already have our risk-free rate. That's 3.83%. Then we grab a widely used academic number for the market risk premium. That's the extra juice investors expect to get for being in the market at all. And finally, by definition, the beta of the entire market is always 1. So we take those numbers, plug them into a standard model that's built for exactly this, and out pops our answer. We get a market rate of return of about 8.55%. That's the first part of our mini-quest done. Now for beta.
Next up, we need our bond-specific beta. Just how sensitive is this bond to the market's ups and downs? And this is where the source material gets really cool. It shows two totally different statistical ways to calculate this number, one using covariance, the other using correlation. And the best part? Check this out. They both land on the exact same number. That's when you know you're on the right track.
And that number is a beta of about 0.02.
Now that is a really, really low number, which basically tells us that this corporate bond isn't very sensitive to what the stock market is doing day to day. It kind of marches to the beat of its own drum, which frankly is what you'd expect. So our second ingredient for the risk premium is now in the bag.
Okay, we've done it. We've gathered all the pieces. We found the risk-free rate, we beat the boss level and got the risk premium. Now it's time to go back to our main map, put it all together, and finally reveal the treasure.
So let's go all the way back to our main treasure map, our master formula. We take our risk-free rate of 3.83%, and we add our expected risk premium. Now remember that little mini formula? We took the market's return, subtracted the risk-free rate, and multiplied it by our tiny little beta. That gives us a risk premium of just 0.1%.
And boom, there it is, the treasure at the end of our quest. The risk-adjusted discount rate for this type of bond is 3.93%. That is the number that perfectly balances that baseline return with all the unique risks of this specific investment.
Okay, so we have this number, 3.93%. Big deal, right? I mean, what's the point? What do we actually do with it? This is the ultimate reward, the whole reason we went on this quest in the first place. The whole point is that this rate is a key that unlocks a whole new level of understanding. With this number, we can now work backwards and figure out what kind of default risk investors are really pricing into a bond. It lets us compare different investments, make way smarter decisions, and truly get a handle on the risk we're taking.
You know, this whole idea of this framework of starting with a safe rate and then adding on a carefully calculated price for risk, that's not just for bonds. That's pretty much all of finance. It applies to stocks, to real estate, you name it. Which leaves us with the final question for you. Now that you have this tool for pricing risk, what promises out there would you start to look at a little differently?